Chapter 150, The Decisive Battle on the Top of the Palace. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. Zhang Yuochen was almost defeated by King Bai. But suddenly, he burst out the power of blood meridian. Wisps of red spiritual blood surged out, forming a thick flake of blood cloud. It was animal spirits fixing beasts. Howl. A low roar of the divine dragon and brute elephant came through the blood fog. Behind Zhang Yuochen, wisps of spiritual blood tangled together, forming two bloody shadows of a dragon and an elephant. The bloody dragon was over 10 meters long with 7 claws and towering horns. The outlines of its scales, horns, and claws could be seen clearer and clearer. The shadow of the blood elephant was magnificent and miraculous, like a mountain that propped up heaven and earth. Supported by the power of blood meridian, Zhang Yuochen's physical power grew stronger, although he was still weaker than King Bai in the Earth realm. Boom! At the last moment, Zhang Yuochen blocked King Bai's exquisite sword movement. With the power of blood meridian, Zhang Yuochen started to strike back. Sacred wind and rain sword. It looked as if Zhang Yuochen became one with the dragon and the elephant. Waving his combat sword and stepping footwork, he presented 9 shadows in a row. A huge vortex of sword breath showed up around his body, forming a fierce sword wind. King Bai also burst out the power of blood meridian, and an illusory image of a peacock blood beast appeared behind him. The peacock blood beast was over 6 meters long, with each of the blood feathers seen clearly. It was just like the incarnation of the Mahamayuri, the god of savage beasts in the ancient times. Resorting to the power of blood meridian, King Bai performed the strongest movement of swallow sword technique. Swallow note here. With his medium state power within the black realm, King Bai couldn't have performed this movement. However, with the power of blood meridian, he forced himself to perform it. Boom! 2 swords clashed again, making a deafening metal sound. The young geniuses in the distance could hardly see Zhang Yuochen and King Bai's figures at all. What they could see was only a strong clash between the illusory images of the blood beasts and the peacock blood beast. Waves were forming on the lake. A sharp moan of the peacock was heard, piercing everyone's eardrum. Fortunately, all the audience here were young masters. If there were warriors with weaker cultivation, they may have already been fainted by the sound wave. King Bai's sword technique was in the mid-class of the spiritual stage. With stronger power and more exquisite change, it had an edge over Zhang Yuochen's. Zhang Yuochen had a higher level in the realm, and his blood beasts had stronger power. Neither of them was in an advantageous position in that clash. Zhang Yuochen's illusory image of the blood beasts nearly tore up King Bai's illusory image of the peacock blood beast. In Jinfeng Court, a voice cried in surprise, "Oh my! Their blood beasts are so miraculous. Ordinary young geniuses can't even block one movement from them." It's not a secret in Cayenne's Yue commandery that King Bai could burst out a peacock blood beast. It almost shocked the whole commandery at that time. According to his master, he has the talent to become a saint. But Zhang Yuochen's blood beast is even more miraculous. Both the divine dragon and the brute elephant are overlords on the land. What's more, he burst the 2 blood beasts out at the same time. I'm afraid his power of blood meridian is stronger than King Bai's. They both have the talent to become saints, said Chua Berlin Su. Liu Xin hummed coldly and said, "It's too early to say so." Many geniuses were outstanding at the very beginning. Others thought they could become saints one day, but they became weak later on. Some failed to break through a certain bottleneck in their whole lives, and some went slower and slower in their practice and eventually stopped. There are too many of them. Some around him nodded. Liu Xin was correct. It was too early to predict their future now. After the clash, Zhang Yuochen landed again on the top of the willow beside the lake, standing there without effort as if he was floating. He picked up his broken sword and looked at it carefully. He found that there were many cracks in it. It looked like the sword might break into pieces any time. King Bai's broken sword faced the same problem as Zhang Yuochen's. The clash was so powerful that the combat swords were almost shaken into pieces. King Bai found himself in the hardest battle since he debuted. He stared at the blood shadows of the dragon and elephant behind Zhang Yuochen without any fear. Instead, he had a strong sense of war intent. Standing on the surface of the lake, he held his hand up to the same height and released his genuine chi and sword comprehension. the water in the lake started to surge. Drops of water flow from the lake were around King Chaibai. These hundreds of drops kept rotating. Condense. King Chaibai's genuine chi had the nature of icing cold. After saying the word, hundreds of drops condensed into a white ice sword immediately. Each of them was about an inch long, completely parceled by genuine chi. Seeing this, many young geniuses were astonished into speechlessness. Only warriors with high cultivation could understand that when one reached the peak of sword following the heart, even a flower, a blade of grass, or a drop of water could condense into a sword. At the same time, as Zhang Yuochen on the willow top raised his arms, all the green leaves on the tree fell down and flew around his body, making the sharp metal sounds of swords. Phhhf, Zhang Yuochen waved his broken sword and pointed it towards King Chaibai. The countless green leaves, covered in genuine chi, flew to King Chaibai like a shower of green sword rain. Clap, clap. At the same time, King Chaibai ordered the small ice-in-cold swords to fly towards Zhang Yuochen. The ice-in-cold swords clashed with the willow leaves swords. After several rounds of clashes, the small ice-in-cold swords and the willow leaves swords disappeared at the same time. Chop! Zhang Yuochen flew behind the willow leaves swords, standing on the leaves. When the leaves disappeared, he condensed all of his genuine chi and slashed fiercely. King Chaibai, slightly astonished, stepped back immediately. Crash! The front of King Chaibai's robe was torn open. The blue robe turned into a cardigan. Fortunately, he stepped back in time, or Zhang Yuochen would hurt him badly. Zhang Yuochen continued his victorious pursuit, leaving no rest for King Chaibai. Sacred Breaking Plum Sword, Sacred Plenilune Sword, Sacred Wind and Rain Sword. Zhang Yuochen performed 18 techniques in a row, looking like 18 shadows. The whole process was smooth in movement and superior in sword comprehension. The sword light almost covered King Chaibai completely. Each sword technique was followed by the next without any pause, endangering King Chaibai many times. 4 more cuts appeared on his robe. One of these cuts injured his skin, leaving a clear blood stain on his body. King Chaibai was in an embarrassing position now. He gave a serious look and cried, "Song of the Forever Coldness." Song of the Forever Coldness, the sword technique in the superior class of the spiritual stage. King Chaibai had been practicing for 3 years, but he could only reach the level of small success. With his cultivation in the medium state of the Black Realm, he couldn't have performed the power of Song of the Forever Coldness. However, supported by the power of Blood Meridian and the peak realm of Sword following the heart, King Chaibai performed 30% of its power. Even 30% of its power blocked Zhang Yuochen's attack easily. What's more, it left a cut on Zhang Yuochen's arm. After blocking Zhang Yuochen's attack, King Chaibai turned around and leapt backward. He bounced with his tiptoe on the lake and landed on the battle stage again. The battle stage was a higher place, while the lake was a lower place. People on the higher place could easily block the attack from the lower place. In other words, occupying the battle stage was equal to win the battle. No matter how Zhang Yuochen attacked him from the lower place, King Chaibai could easily block it. As the old Chinese motto said, one must win with good timing, good geographical convenience, and good human relations. Now, King Chaibai had good geographical convenience. He could both defend and attack. It seemed that the success belonged to him without a doubt. Now, it's hard for Zhang Yuochen to win, but it's good enough to force King Chaibai to go back to the higher place for defense. No matter Zhang Yuochen wins or not today, he will definitely be famous and become a top genius that can stand shoulder to shoulder with King Chaibai. Liu Xin stared at Zhang Yuochen and sneered. Now, what can you do next? At this moment, Zhang Yuochen suddenly moved. Zhang Yuochen didn't attack King Chaibai on the battle stage. Instead, he performed Shadow of the Royal Wind Dragon. He stepped into the void space and flew to Jinfin Court in the distance. Xuobel Insu figured out Zhang Yuochen's intention. He said, the battle stage is 18 meters high, but Jinfin Court is 83 meters high, 4 times higher than the battle stage. If Zhang Yuochen can land on the 3rd floor of Jinfin Court, he will be the one who can occupy the higher place. For other warriors, it was almost impossible to get on the Jinfin Court, but for Zhang Yuochen, who had practiced Shadow of the Royal Wind Dragon, it was not that hard. Realizing Zhang Yuochen's intention, King Chaibai performed Meteoric Rise and flew towards the top of Jinfeng Court hurriedly when Zhang Yuochen took the third step. After the ninth step, Zhang Yuochen landed on the rooftop of Jinfeng Court. He stepped on the glazed tiles as if he were a young sword fairy from heaven. King Chaibai was one step later to land on the rooftop. Zhang Yuochen waved his arm, and a bunch of sword light of 7 meters long slashed towards King Chaibai's legs. King Chaibai stayed calm. He chose not to counter with Zhang Yuochen directly. He sank his body and landed on the 4th floor of Jinfeng Court. After a moment, a loud boom came from the top of the court. King Chaibai dashed through the glazed tiles and flew into the 10-meter air. He held the sword in his hands and slashed for 13 times. Zhang Yuochen, standing steadily on the rooftop, slashed 13 times as well. He shook King Chaibai's sword breath into pieces completely. Crash! Piles of glazed tiles were broken by the sword breath and fell off the roof. They both stood on the rooftop of over 80 meters high. The shadows crossed and the swords clashed, making ear-piercing sounds. Are they going to have a decisive battle on the top of Yunwu City? Young geniuses below all upturned their necks and looked upward. Not only them but also the warriors in the whole place could see the battle on the rooftop. The battle caused a big sensation. Boom! The swords in their hands clashed again. The two broken swords crashed into pieces at the same time, turning into iron pieces and flying towards all directions. Seeing iron pieces flying towards himself, King Chaibai quickly threw away his bare sword handles and moved backward immediately to escape them.